For today's short meditation, let us turn our pages to Psalms 40 verses 17. We'll be focusing on last verse from this chapter. Throughout this chapter of Psalms 40, we see how David is praying to God, how much of God's attention is given to him. And when it comes to attention as a human being, some of us love spotlight, some of us love attention. There's a story which said there was a place, a very crowded place, and everyone was so busy, and a young boy, he shouted in that crowd like, "Excuse me, everybody, excuse me," like that. And the noisy crowd totally becomes silent, and they turn to this young boy what he's going to say. And he just said, "Thank you very much, I just love attention," and he just sat down. So it is like that. Most of us in our life, we love attentions. We love people recognizing us or something that is needed to be given. And this story reminds how David is seeking attention and how God gives him the attention. God alone has the knowledge of our whole being, and he gives his attention to us. Here in Psalms 139 verse 1, we see how David links God's attentiveness with his knowledge, and he personalized with these words. In chapter 139, we see how David says that, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." And further in that chapter, we see how David rejoices how God gives him the attention, and in everything about him, his actions, his thoughts, his words, and everything. In further verses in 2 and 4, we see how God had designed him, created him, and determined how long he could live. Throughout a whole life of a person, how God is showing his attentiveness, how he alters a person, and how much he cares for the person. And lastly, in verse 17, we see how David concludes in saying, "How precious also are your thoughts to me, O God." We see how David is being so marveled on how God is so preciously concerned about a person's life, concerned about his whole person's being, and gives him the attention that he needs. But as a human being, we fail to see that because there is no closer relationship with God, and that relationship is being broken. We don't see that attention, and we seek attention from worldly people, not from God. Here we see how David had a close relationship with God, that he realized how God is so attentive to him, and he was amazed and marveled with it. And here in verse 17 of chapter 40, we see David says, "Yet I am poor and needy. May the Lord think of me. You are my help and my deliverer. Oh my God, do not delay." Here we see in the first part of this verse how much David is saying, though he is in need, though he is a poor, the Lord thinks of him. It was not just David that the Lord thinks of him. It is even for us. This verse is applicable even for us. The Lord thinks of us. He gives his attentions to us. Are we attentive to him? That is the thing we need to examine today. Are we seeking him? Are we paying our attention to him? Though he has so much of attention to us, we fail to recognize that. But when we recognize, we can also be so joyful, and like David, we can also be so joyfully praising God. But if we are absent-minded and if we are not able to recognize it, we are still miserable in this life. So when we recognize how God's attentiveness is there for us, we rejoice in meditating in him. And God's attentiveness is very constant. In this life, whenever we feel like nobody cares for us or nobody loves us, we need to meditate on Psalms 139. And we need to be satisfied of how God is showing us the attention. And the only question it remains on us, do we show the attention towards him as much as he shows to us? And there's a quote which says, "Keep your eyes on the Lord. He never takes his eyes off you." He never takes his eyes off us. Do we keep our eyes on him? If not, let us try to keep our eyes. Let us keep our eyes fixed on him. Amen.